Let's begin.
Burn, ungodly filth!
What do you want? To make you ours or to make you despair?
Spirit Blade Productions presents...
Do you have any idea how much I will make you suffer? The horrific agony that I will inflict.
Spirit Blade Dark Ritual.
Hell will be a refuge for you when I'm finished. For more information, visit spiritblade.com. Well, my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about Hotel Artemis? Stick around and find out. All the leaves are brown, and the sky is gray, and the sky is gray. I've been for... That's all I know. I don't know any of the popular music. I actually had to YouTube that just to learn that much because it's part of the soundtrack, so I thought that's the best I could come up with. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com, and this is my uncut review of Hotel Artemis. The synopsis on IMDb, very brief, reads, set in riot-torn near-future Los Angeles, Hotel Artemis follows the nurse who runs a secret, members-only emergency room for criminals. And I would add to that there's a story about a criminal looking to leave behind his life of crime, who brings his wounded brother to the hotel for emergency treatment. He's a major character as well, but a brewing conflict between the members of the underworld stands in the way of his hopes for a new life. And meanwhile, this nurse, played by Jodie Foster, is in charge, and she's haunted by guilt from her past that I won't say anything about, that has made her panic-prone and kind of a shut-in at this what is really a hospital that she works at, and her fear of life keeps her from ever stepping outside of that quote-unquote hotel. Both of these characters really have to confront their past over the course of the movie and decide how they're going to move into the future. So that's the gist of it. The trailer gave me the impression that this would have more interesting characters than it did to me. In the trailer, the visual design stood out as having lots of character, just the way it looked. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Jodie Foster in the trailers was clearly playing a character role instead of the more standard leading lady that I've seen her in most movies in the past. And Jeff Goldblum is being Jeff Goldblum, but when you cast Jeff Goldblum, it's usually for something kind of quirky and offbeat. But the script didn't give me the quirkiness, the creativity, or the humor that I guess I kind of expected this movie to have. It's largely, I would call it, a crime drama with a light sci-fi setting. It takes place 10 years in the future, just enough that you could have the kind of sci-fi that you would see in a street-level superhero comic book, where we're not getting cosmic and alien technology, but the technology is just a little bit ahead of where, it is in the real world. There are action beats at the beginning of this movie, and then it ramps up again a lot at the end, but most of the movie is, kind of people talking to each other with a few tense moments. So it's definitely not this action fest by any stretch. Speaking about the cast, just briefly, really the only one that I would want to say much about would be Jodie Foster. She delivered for me in every scene that she was in. Her character has been hardened by life, but also harbors this great vulnerability, and so to see her kind of displaying both of those, just a great range of emotions, and I loved watching her, and she pulled me into the heart of her character repeatedly and gave me some really nice emotional moments, where I was caught up and almost started welling up with tears. I wish that this movie would have been an even smaller film, like a short film even, that just focused on her, because I found everyone else very forgettable, unfortunately. Speaking briefly about the visuals, there's not much for me to say about the stunts. I mean, it's standard, stunt work. I didn't feel like it was shot in an especially, creative way or anything. But the set and the costume designs remind me of kind of like that colorful yet worn down look of the hotel that Morpheus was in the first Matrix movie, and they come back to it, I guess, in the other Matrix movies. But there's these greens and these dark reds and maybe some blues and stuff. So there are definitely colors, but it's all kind of dark. It's not really bright. It's a dark kind of lighting to the whole thing, but still colorful in its own way. And then, similar to the Matrix, some of the characters had very fancy, stylish wardrobe that was kind of in contrast to the colorful yet very worn down look of the Artemis Hotel, and that was very striking to me in the trailer, just the visual look. But the visual look, felt at odds with the actual feel I got from the story and characters, which I described before. Almost as though like the visual look was too stylish for what felt like an uninteresting story to me. As far as like themes, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in here that might trigger a worthwhile thought or conversation? Maybe. Past guilt is a significant theme in this story. The nurse, especially, has been scarred by her feelings of guilt that she is just constantly carrying with her, constantly trying to deal with or suppress. It's not clear to me exactly how she's endeavoring to kind of compensate for this guilt that she feels, philosophically or psychologically. She is listening to a self-help recording that she carries around with her that has a soothing voice that at one point even affirms the value of forgiveness and suggests that forgiveness can be experienced. I'm paraphrasing there, but it was something along those lines. But the source of that forgiveness is left untouched. We don't have that thing playing long enough to really get an idea of, okay, well, what is the philosophy being expressed in this recording, regarding how to have some peace in troubling circumstances or in light of, horrible past that keeps coming to mind, or guilt or whatever, So we don't get, I think it's almost there just to kind of give a layer to her character, maybe for comedic effect, but the philosophy of what, that recording or whatever is not, delved into enough. I see the world generally going one of two directions to try and deal with guilt. The first one would be to lower the bar or normalize the behavior. We say to each other, when someone is having kind of a confessional moment, they're saying, man, I did this, or I've been feeling this way or thinking this way, and I shouldn't be. And what do our friends do? They're quick to do, and we do this too. I've caught myself a number of times doing this, saying, "Oh, that's okay. Everybody does that. Oh, that's okay." But really, it's not okay. But yet we still try to make it okay. We try to make them feel better by saying it's okay. It's not that big a deal, and of course, it is relative. So I mean, in one sense, you could accurately say it's not that big of a deal. You didn't murder an entire country of people. Or saying everyone does that, or we might say, there are entire movements based on normalizing behavior where they would say, well, that's not wrong, it's who you are. That's who you are. You shouldn't be ashamed of who you are, And the other direction I see people going to try and deal with guilt or shame is that the guilty resolve to forgive themselves, which seems essentially to be to pretend that the guilty themselves have been wronged somehow by their own actions against someone else, and they are therefore able to pardon their own actions committed against someone else. Or maybe it does mean something more sensible, but it's not something usually evaluated or spelled out. It's just kind of like this thing, well, I just had to learn to forgive myself, or you just need to learn to forgive yourself. And boy, that sounds kind of nice, but what in the world does that mean? And are we in a position to do that? If objective moral values and duties don't exist, in other words, we all just kind of decide what our own moral code is, and everyone's moral code is just as valid as anyone else's. That is to say, none of them are really valid or binding. So objective is what I'm talking about. Real and binding through all of reality. If objective moral values and duties don't exist, then guilt itself is irrational and should just be discarded without going to the trouble of justifying our behavior through normalization or forgiving ourselves. But if objective moral values and duties do exist, as most accept they do, as biblical Christianity certainly affirms, then we're not in a position of objective authority to conveniently lower the moral bar for ourselves and each other, or to grant ourselves forgiveness. Instead, we need to figure out, okay, what's the source of those objective moral values and duties, and then we need to seek justification and forgiveness there from the source, if that source is willing to grant it. Even as Christians, we can get caught up in these two mentalities, as I mentioned earlier. I've seen a Christian publication affirm the value of, quote-unquote, forgiving oneself. And I can understand maybe, if we spell that out, if we say forgiving oneself as a Christian is equal to recognizing that you are forgiven, well then I could agree with that. But that's not what that phrase sounds like to me at all. It sounds like you are the one wronged, or you are the one in a position of authority to forgive yourself. But yeah, so that doesn't work for me. I also hear Christians console each other's guilt by normalizing it, which I mentioned earlier, and I catch myself doing that now and then. But really, as believers in the free, inexhaustible forgiveness and justification provided by Jesus, our approach ought to be to recognize sin, to stare it in the face as we see it in ourselves, and feel that stabbing wound of, oh man, I really screwed up. I'm really a mess. So we ought to be able to recognize sin and shortcoming in its fullness, and then remember, right with that same moment, the tireless forgiveness and the cleared record that we are unendingly given by Jesus. The solution to feelings of guilt and shame is not to compare ourselves favorably to others or pretend that we aren't as broken as we are. The solution is to face our sin and brokenness, recognize that we act as David did, that we wrong God more than we do wrong anyone else, and then trust that through Jesus we really do have this fresh and tireless forgiveness and a clean slate before the ultimate judge of all reality. All right, well, I have no idea what your tastes in movies are, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Vader, skip this one for now. Take a little bit of time off and rest before E3 gets started. Jodie Foster is great in this, so when it is free to watch someday, maybe since you get Prime, Amazon Prime, catch it when it's there, or some other place that it eventually winds up, and maybe put it on at that time, just while you're playing a video game or something, and hit pause when Jodie Foster comes on screen, because she delivers a great performance you're really going to enjoy and get the feels from. But the rest of the time, you can just coast through and play your video game while you're keeping track of the story. It's not something that's going to be super engaging for you at all. It's rated R for violence and language throughout, some sexual references, and brief drug use. All right, those are my thoughts. I'd love to get yours in the comments below. Stay tuned for my reactions to E3 announcements, press events, and showcases all week starting tomorrow. Please do like, share, subscribe, and also click that notification bell so you don't miss the next video. And then I hope you'll join us soon over at christiangeekcentral.com. Where's that button? As we continue to geek out and seek the truth.
Let's begin.
Burn, ungodly filth!
What do you want to make you ours or to make you despair?
Spirit Blade Productions presents
Do you have any idea how much I will make you suffer? The horrific agony that I will inflict.
Spirit Blade Dark Ritual.
Hell will be a refuge for you when I'm finished.
For more information, visit spiritblade.com.